Good morning, 4L, 4S, 4G, and 4R. Have you ever been to a 3D movie? Probably not for a little while. We've all been stuck in our houses. But maybe before this quarantine started, you went to a 3D movie. Have you ever wondered what that D in 3D stands for? Maybe some of you already know. The D in 3D stands for dimensions. A dimension is a math concept that helps us to understand what kind of space we need to think about. So a 3D movie is a movie that seems to come out of the screen at you. You can see the whole height of the screen, you can see the whole width of the screen, and the people seem to jump out of that screen at you. That's why it's a 3D movie. It has length and width and depth. It seems deep as well. One dimension would just be a line. One dimension, we can measure length or we can measure width, but not both at the same time. We could only look at one dimension. So if I were walking in a straight line, I might measure that using centimeters or a meter. If I were driving in a straight line to somewhere, actually it could even be a curvy line, I'm still only driving in one dimension. I'm not driving forwards and to the side at the same time. But when we think about 2D, then that's where we're looking at length and width at the same time. Now, how does this connect to the math problem that we worked on yesterday? Our math problem yesterday was about the amount of space that students would get at a desk. So I want you to think about your desk for a minute, the desk you're sitting at right now. What part of the desk do you need? Do you just need a straight line at the edge? Or do you use the surface of the desk? Do you use a whole area? If you're like me, you use the whole area. You put your books flat. You set your iPad or your computer down. And when you do that, you cover some of the area at a desk. When we're thinking about how much space we need at a table, we need to be thinking about 2D or two dimensions, the length and the width. And that means we can't just measure it using a meter or a centimeter. We need to think about a different kind of measurement. Perimeter is the distance around the outside of a shape. So perimeter would be the distance around the outside of your desk. We could measure that in units. For example, centimeters or meters. When we measure the perimeter, of course there might be something inside of it, but that's not the part that we're paying attention to. If we're only measuring in 1D, then often we're just thinking in 1D. If you only needed the perimeter of a desk, it would mean you would only use the very edge of it. You would maybe even have to put your book kind of like on a tightrope around the outside of your desk to use it that way. But actually, when we're talking about space at a desk, we're talking about area. Area is the amount of space that a shape covers. We measure it in square units. That's why the floor tiles in the diagram from yesterday's problem were so helpful, because we could look at some of the tables and see, oh, they covered 8 tiles. So we could say that this table is 8 tiles big. If this orange table on this slide were what we were talking about, then this particular table has 20 square units. How do we know? There are 4 rows and 5 columns. If I look at those 2 dimensions, I can see that there are 20 square units in all. So if I were sharing this table with 4 students, or 4 students were sharing this table, then each student would get 5 square units of space. We don't know how big each of those tiles are, so we can just say units for now. Today, I want you to continue to think about this idea between measuring in 2D and measuring in 1D. Let me go back here. So sometimes I like to make quilts. Here's one more example. If I wanted to measure how much fabric I needed, now quilt is a blanket to keep you warm. It's getting cold outside. If I wanted to measure how much fabric I needed, I need to think about how much area I want to cover. After all, a blanket that is just like a string isn't very helpful. I want the blanket to cover me. So I need to think about how much area I want to cover. But if I wanted to sew a ribbon around the outside of this quilt, then I would need to measure the perimeter, the distance around the outside. I wouldn't want my ribbon to cover my whole beautiful design. So in that situation, I would just need to measure the perimeter. Grade 4, it's not always easy to tell the difference between area and perimeter. So today, you're going to do a little bit of practicing. In your seesaw activity today, you have some different situations to look at. Please read each of those situations and figure out, do you need to be thinking in 2 dimensions here? Do you need to think about how much area something would cover? Or do you just need to think in 1 dimension? Do you just need to think about going in a line around the outside? That's your thinking to do today. Good luck, grade 4.